3 minutes? That's all it took. 3 minutes for one coaching decision to ignite an absolute firestorm that would consume the entire basketball world within hours. Caitlin Clark, the biggest name in women's basketball, the player who single-handedly dragged the WNBA into mainstream cultural relevance, walked onto the court for a nationally televised game looking like she was ready to put on a show. She was aggressive.
Caitlin Clark came out once again with her hair on fire. Stephanie White benched her. What are we?
She was locked in. She was doing exactly what every single fan tuning in wanted to see. And then, just like that, she was sitting on the bench. Not because of an injury, not because of foul trouble.
About this game. Look at this, folks. Fever in the first half versus the Fire. 9 of 29, 31%, 1 of 10 from three-point range.
Not because the team was cruising with a comfortable lead. No, head coach Stephanie White pulled her after barely 3 minutes of game time, and what followed was nothing short of a full-scale organizational meltdown broadcast live for the entire country.
Like I said, Caitlin Clark came out like her hair was on fire. Stephanie White pulled her, I believe, 3 minutes, 3 mother effing minutes into the game, and it was a wrap.
To witness. Now, this wasn't some random mid-season game against a conference powerhouse where you could maybe justify some strategic rest. This was a primetime national television showcase against the Portland Fire, a brand new expansion franchise that had been in existence for about 5 minutes. The WNBA had fought for years to secure premium broadcast windows exactly like this one, specifically to put their biggest star on display for millions.
Guys, this was halftime. I want you to look at the ratio of likes to comments on the Indiana Fever page. They are getting ratioed to hell. I can only imagine. Oh, wow. It's already started. We'll look at that in the morning. 85 likes to 159 comments.
Millions of casual viewers. And instead of a masterclass, those viewers got a front row seat to chaos. But what actually happened on that court was only part of the story. What happened on the sideline? What happened on social media?
By the way, Monique Billings didn't even play 8 minutes. Why was she signed exactly?
And what's been quietly building behind the scenes for weeks now paints a picture that should genuinely terrify anyone who cares about the future of this franchise. Let's rewind and break down exactly what unfolded on that floor in Portland. The game tips off, and Caitlin Clark comes out absolutely blazing. Her energy is electric. She's pushing the pace, she's looking to attack, she's making the right reads. Within less than 3 minutes of action, she's already put up 2 points and dished out 3 assists. For anyone watching, it was immediately obvious that she came into this game with a fire in her eyes, ready to impose her will on a young, inexperienced expansion roster. And honestly, that's exactly what you want from your franchise player. That's what the fans paid to see. That's what the television executives scheduled this game for. That's what the entire league's growth model depends on.
There is a video that has come out of Caitlin Clark talking about, yeah, we need to get the ball into the post and yada, yada, yada. What bothers me the most is it's starting to sound like Stephanie White has finally beat down Caitlin Clark. And it's really concerning.
So what does the coaching staff do with all of that momentum? They rip it away. At the 6.5-minute mark of the first quarter, with Clark looking like the best player on the floor, Stephanie White calls for a substitution. Clark heads to the bench, and just like that, the entire complexion of the game shifts in a way that would become irreversible. The Portland Fire, a team that by all accounts should have been completely overmatched, smelled blood in the water immediately. They launched a devastating 13-2 run that blew the doors wide open. And why wouldn't they? The one player on the Indiana roster who forces defenses to extend and scramble, the one player whose gravitational pull creates spacing for everyone else, was sitting on the bench watching it happen. Without Clark on the floor, the Fever's offense didn't just struggle. It ceased to exist in any recognizable form. The first half numbers were genuinely horrifying. 9 for 29 from the field. That's 31% shooting in a professional basketball game. 1 for 10 from three-point range. 1 for 10. The offensive spacing collapsed entirely because there was no perimeter threat forcing the defense to stretch. Portland's game plan became embarrassingly simple. Pack the paint, stand your ground, watch Indiana beat themselves, and it worked to perfection. By the time the final buzzer sounded, the scoreboard read 100-84 in favor of the expansion team. Caitlin Clark finished with a season-low 6 points on 1 for 7 shooting, 5 fouls, and a season-low 22 minutes of playing time. Read those numbers again. Your franchise player, your generational talent, your billion-dollar marketing engine, played 22 minutes in a nationally televised game and scored 6 points. Not because she was hurt, not because she was ineffective when she was out there, because the coaching staff chose this. They chose this outcome. And what made it even worse was the way the game ended. The starters were left out on the floor deep into the third and fourth quarters of a blowout that was mathematically over long before the final buzzer. Those 18 and 17-point stat lines, sitting next to the frontcourt players' names in the box score, might look decent on paper if you didn't actually watch the game. But anyone who did knows exactly what that was. That was textbook garbage time stat padding, designed to manufacture a respectable-looking box score to cover up the ugly truth of a 16-point demolition at the hands of a team that didn't even exist a year ago. But the on-court disaster was only half of what people were talking about after this game. Here's where things get really interesting and honestly, really uncomfortable. During a timeout in that first quarter, cameras captured a moment that would go viral within minutes and dominate sports media for days. Stephanie White is in the huddle delivering forceful, animated instructions to the team. The intensity is cranked up to 11. And right there, in full view of every camera in the building, Caitlin Clark responds. She throws her arms up in the air. She shakes her head. The body language is unmistakable. This isn't a player calmly receiving coaching instruction. This is a player who is visibly frustrated, openly disagreeing with what's being communicated. And then comes the dagger. White turns and signals for rookie guard Raven Johnson to check in. Johnson, a first-year player, is going to replace the face of the franchise. In the first quarter of a nationally televised game against an expansion team. The optics of that moment were absolutely devastating, and the internet knew it immediately. Clark was visibly displaced after the substitution. She wasn't huddled up with teammates on the bench going over plays. She wasn't leaning in, engaged with what was happening on the court. The energy radiating from that bench was ice cold, and millions of people saw it happen in real time. Social media didn't just react, it erupted. Before the halftime buzzer had even sounded, the Indiana Fever's official social media accounts were getting absolutely demolished. The ratio was staggering. 85 likes to 159 comments on their halftime post. When you see numbers like that on an official team account, it tells you everything you need to know. The fans aren't just unhappy, they're furious. And they're letting the organization know in the most direct way possible that what they just watched was completely unacceptable. Now, in any other situation, you might be able to write off a sideline exchange between a coach and a star player as just competitive fire. It happens in every sport at every level. Tempers flare, words get exchanged, everyone moves on. But this situation is different because of one critical detail that changes the entire equation. This wasn't an isolated incident, not even close. If this was the first time Caitlin Clark had been yanked early in a game, maybe you could give the coaching staff the benefit of the doubt. Maybe you could accept the minute's management explanation at face value and move on. But the numbers tell a completely different story, and it's a story that's becoming impossible to dismiss. In 5 of the 7 games Clark has played this season, she hasn't even been on the court for 7 minutes in the first quarter. 5 out of 7. That's not a coincidence. That's not random rotational variance. That's a deliberate, systematic pattern of pulling your best player off the floor before she can establish any kind of rhythm or flow. Sports commentator Jason Whitlock went public with what a lot of people had been thinking privately. He pointed the finger directly at White, arguing that this recurring pattern of early substitutions is actively undermining Clark's ability to find her groove and impact games the way she's capable of. He used a word that cut straight through the noise and grabbed everyone's attention. Sabotage. Now, is that fair? Is it reasonable to accuse a head coach of deliberately sabotaging her own star player? It sounds extreme on the surface. But when you look at the pattern, when you look at the statistical fallout every single time Clark gets pulled early, it becomes harder and harder to explain away. Every time Clark leaves the floor in that first quarter, the same thing happens. The spacing evaporates. The ball movement stalls. The offense devolves into a stagnant, predictable mess that any competent defense can shut down without breaking a sweat. It's like clockwork at this point. And White's explanation, she calls it routine substitution, minutes management, standard coaching practice. But here's the thing about that defense. Minutes management is something you apply to a 35-year-old veteran with bad knees in the back half of a long season. It's not something you weaponize against a 24-year-old franchise cornerstone in the first quarter of a nationally televised game against the worst team in the league. The math doesn't add up. The logic doesn't hold. And the results on the court have been catastrophic every single time. Critics, analysts, and the overwhelming majority of the fanbase aren't buying the party line anymore. The trust is eroding fast, and then something happened that threw gasoline on an already raging fire. In the middle of all this controversy, with the basketball world buzzing and debate raging on every platform, a report started circulating that completely blew the lid off the situation. According to what appeared to be a credible source, Stephanie White had been relieved of her coaching duties effective immediately. The report went further, claiming that Jan Jensen, one of Caitlin Clark's beloved coaches from her legendary run at the University of Iowa, was expected to be named as White's replacement. The narrative was almost too perfect. The coach who couldn't figure out how to use her generational talent was out, and the coach who had already proven she could build an entire system around Clark was coming in to save the day. Fans went absolutely wild. Social media was flooded with celebration, vindication, and a wave of optimism that felt almost therapeutic after weeks of frustration. There was just one problem: it was completely fake. The entire report originated from a fake account impersonating a credible journalist. There was no firing. There was no coaching change. Jan Jensen wasn't packing her bags for Indianapolis. It was all fabricated from thin air. But here's what made the whole situation even messier. Skip Bayless, the polarizing sports media personality with millions of followers, didn't just see the fake report. He ran with it, full speed, no verification, no fact-checking. He posted on X, repeating the claim as though it were confirmed news, essentially amplifying a completely baseless rumor to his massive audience. When the report was debunked and Bayless was called out for spreading misinformation, did he back down? Did he issue a full retraction and move on? Not exactly. He doubled down on the underlying sentiment, suggesting that even if this particular report was false, it was only a matter of time before something like it became true. He essentially argued that White's days were numbered regardless of whether this specific story was accurate. Now, you might be thinking, okay, that's just Skip being Skip. He's built an entire career on hot takes and controversy. Fair enough. But the fact that millions of people not only believed the fake report instantly, but actively celebrated, it tells you everything you need to know about the current state of public opinion regarding this coaching situation. When your fanbase is so desperate for change that they'll latch onto an unverified rumor from a fake account and treat it like a national holiday, you have a serious, serious problem. Beat reporters on the ground quickly confirmed that no coaching change was imminent and that the organization had no plans to make a move. But the damage to the public narrative had already been done, and the underlying questions that fueled the whole fiasco weren't going anywhere. So naturally, the spotlight turned to the two people at the center of all of it. So where does all of this leave us? Let's zoom all the way out and look at the full picture, because the stakes here go way beyond a single regular season game or a single viral sideline clip. Stephanie White is not some random, unproven coach who stumbled into this job. She has deep roots with this franchise. During her first stint as head coach back in 2015, she led the Fever all the way to the WNBA Finals. That's not ancient history. That's legitimate postseason success at the highest level. She came back for the second stint with a clear vision and a defensive-minded philosophy, and last season, even with Clark missing the vast majority of the year due to injury, she guided this team to the playoff semifinals. That's not nothing. That's a coach who clearly knows how to get results under difficult circumstances. But here's the tension that sits at the heart of everything. Knowing how to grind out wins with a roster of role players and defensive specialists is a completely different skill set than knowing how to build and unleash an offense around a once-in-a-generation offensive talent. And right now, there are growing questions about whether White possesses that second skill set, or more accurately, whether she's even interested in deploying it. The modern WNBA is evolving rapidly. Pace and space basketball isn't just a trend anymore. It's the fundamental operating system of every successful team in the league. You need floor spacing. You need ball movement. You need your best playmaker to have the freedom and the minutes to orchestrate the offense at her tempo. What you absolutely cannot do is force a player like Caitlin Clark into a rigid, post-heavy, grind-it-out system that neutralizes every single thing that makes her special. It would be like buying a Ferrari and then only driving it in first gear through a school zone. You're technically using it, but you're completely wasting what it was built to do. The front office is equally culpable in this mess. Assembling a roster that doesn't complement your franchise player's skill set is organizational malpractice, plain and simple. You need shooters around Clark. You need athletes who can run the floor in transition. You need bigs who can space the floor and operate in pick-and-pop actions, not clog the lane and demand post touches. Every roster decision should start and end with one question. Does this move make Caitlin Clark's life easier? If the answer is no, you don't make the move, period. And here's the part that should keep every single person in that organization up at night. Player empowerment in women's basketball is at an all-time high. The days of franchise players quietly suffering through dysfunction because they had no leverage are over. Stars demand trades now. Stars force their way to better situations. If this organization continues down this path, if they keep stifling Clark's creativity, if they keep running schemes that don't fit her game, if they keep making headlines for all the wrong reasons, the unthinkable becomes very thinkable very quickly. A trade demand. A public fallout. The kind of franchise-defining disaster that takes a decade to recover from. And it wouldn't just devastate Indiana. It would send shockwaves through the entire league. The WNBA's current media rights deals, the new collective bargaining agreement, the massive surge in attendance and viewership over the past 2 years, all of it is built on the foundation of Caitlin Clark playing meaningful, exciting basketball for the Indiana Fever. If that foundation cracks, every single franchise in the league feels the financial impact. The local media hasn't helped matters either. When a professional sports team suffers a historically embarrassing loss defined by bizarre coaching decisions and visible player frustration, the post-game press conference should be an absolute gauntlet of accountability. Hard questions should be flying. Job security should be on the table. Tactical decisions should be dissected in granular detail. Instead, the coverage has been painfully soft, borderline negligent in its refusal to hold anyone's feet to the fire. If the reporters in the room won't ask the difficult questions, they become part of the problem. They become complicit in normalizing a level of dysfunction that this franchise and this fanbase simply cannot afford. So here we are, standing at what feels like a genuine fork in the road for one of the most important franchises in women's sports. Down one path, the organization recognizes the severity of the situation, makes bold moves, potentially overhauls the coaching philosophy, builds a modern system around their generational talent, and unleashes the full potential of what this team could be. Down the other path, stubbornness prevails, the internal friction continues to simmer, the product on the court remains unwatchable for a fanbase that's already running out of patience, and eventually, inevitably, something breaks that can't be fixed. The 2-hour team meeting is a start, but meetings don't win games. Meetings don't fix schematic incompatibility. Meetings don't magically transform a roster built for one style of play into one suited for another. At some point, words have to become action, and right now, the only actions this organization has taken have made things measurably worse. So who's really to blame here? Is it the front office for constructing a roster that feels like it was designed for a completely different era of basketball? Is it the coaching staff for stubbornly clinging to a philosophy that actively works against their most important player? Is it the media for refusing to hold anyone accountable? Or is it some toxic combination of all three that's created a perfect storm of dysfunction? Here's what I know for sure. You can't defend all of them. Something has to give. Someone has to be held responsible. and the clock is ticking louder with every passing game. Drop your thoughts in the comments. Tell me who you think needs to go first. And if you're not subscribed yet, now's the time, because this story is far from over, and you're going to want to be here when the next chapter unfolds.